We've got ourselves a rainy day in the winter in Canada, a day when one needs shelter. And shelter is a funny thing. We tend to take it for granted when we have it. When we don't, it's a totally different situation. So this humble little cabin provides us all the comforts that we need. Shelter, we can have extra food, we got warmth, we got clothes. But in this series we've been doing on shelter building, what I'm trying to demonstrate is the need to have the ability to build shelter. And I'm going to step out of my 18th century persona for a minute, talk about a modern trip that Cathy and I did down the Yukon River. So we're on a 750-kilometer trip from Whitehorse, Yukon to Dawson City. And we're about a week in, a little over a week in, and we're striking camp. So I'm brewing up coffee. Cathy's striking the tent. She's got the fly off and she's pulled the pegs. So, and it's dead calm. Like, I mean, if you were holding a lit candle, it wouldn't blow it out. And so I can remember vividly turning over my shoulder to say to Cathy, the coffee's ready. When this gust of wind hits me in the face, I see the tent pick up. It flies over my head. It flies over, I don't know, 15-foot tag halters that were along the Yukon River and plunks into the fastest flowing water in Canada. And it is fast. And whew, our tents, our shelter is gone down the Yukon River. Fortunately, it only went a couple hundred yards, and there was this willow had a limb caught on something down below, and it was bobbing. And if darn tent didn't catch up on that. So one of the fellows on this trip with us, he was in a kayak, and he had a wetsuit. So we tied him off. He got a life jacket on. We lowered him into the Yukon. He went out and he grabbed this tent and he bundled it all up in his arms, and we pulled him back to shore, and then we assessed the damage. Now we were able to fix a few poles and stitch up a few rips, and it provided a shelter for the remaining part of the trip. But it's a good lesson for those that are doing any kind of adventure in the wilderness, is to have the ability to make shelter, because without it, it's self-explanatory. Anyway, I'm heading back out tomorrow for another adventure. Hopefully this isn't happening, but if it is, I'm going anyway, just to test my ability to make that shelter and get out of inclement type weather situations. Okay, that's about as quick a shelter as anybody can put up. And so I built a number of shelters over the last couple of weeks, and I said I was going to rank them. So I think this is a good time to do that. I was going to build a litter shelter, and it's just what it says. You build whatever litter, whatever debris you've got. Typically, they were built, you know, off a leaning limb, where it's sort of shallow at the back end, and they widen out at the front like an A-frame. The problem with litter or debris shelters are they're not waterproof. If you build them right and intertwine your branches, you can make them water resistant. If it's spring, fall particularly, where you can gather mounds of leaves, you can make them pretty watertight, but not this time of year. So this shelter, I built this a number of years ago, and it's been my faithful companion on many a trek. Essentially, it's just a flat tarp that I sewed 2 triangular pieces in. It's a solo tarp, obviously. If you wanted it for 2, you'd build it just about double the dimensions for the triangle and the length or width, I guess, of the top tarp. So for tonight, because it's getting dark, I've got a lot of work to do. I've got to gather firewood. But I'm going to utilize these rocks over here as a natural fire pit. They're big, they're really close to the shelter. They're going to warm up, they're going to hold a lot of heat tonight. So that's going to work really well. So in terms of ranking them, I got to say this is my number one. This is my go-to shelter. As I say, it served me well. It's been on countless historic treks. It's waterproof. And with these triangles in the end, I deal with that wind problem coming in. So I picked this site here because my wind's traveling like this, so I should have a smoke-free environment tonight in my tarp. In terms of the most amount of work, obviously it was the first one, the log structure with the fireplace inside. There's no way in a normal situation, survival situation, one would build that. But if you were going to stay put for a while, the pros of it are really comfortable, really warm, really dry, a raised bed. It had everything going for it except for the amount of labor to build it. And you saw how much labor it was to build this one. So it is a trade-off. The bark shelter is pretty much waterproof shelter, and it went up really easy because it's just sort of a conical shape like they would have built for their winter camps. So that works very well. The debris shelter, as I say, would be my last one, however I would do it. And the other shelter one can look at, there's 2 other forms of shelters. One's find a natural area, like an overhanging rock. Can work perfect. A cave is ideal, but there's few and far between in this area. And the other thing is simply a wool blanket. So if you're building a debris wool blanket or a debris shelter and you can afford to spare one of your wool blankets, assuming you've got 2, is you can throw one on as a tarp, as a canopy. A wool blanket will absorb a lot of water before it starts to rain through it. It can be as simple as tucking in at the base of a big old hemlock tree, getting that blanket over your head and a candle in a cup, and you've got a primitive shelter there as well. Anyway, I'm talking way too much because I got to get firewood. I don't have a whole lot of victuals left to eat, but I think I got enough in there I can make something to take away the pangs of hunger here. And I better get at it.